Okay, so you want to own a solar farm. You picture it on a clear morning. You drive out past the edge of town, past the last gas station, and there it is, rows and rows of dark blue panels tilted toward the sun, stretching out across land that used to grow nothing but weeds. They move, slowly, tracking the light across the sky like a field of mechanical sunflowers. There's no smoke. There's no noise. Just a faint electric hum and the click of the trackers adjusting. And somewhere in a little steel cabinet at the edge of the field, a meter is spinning, quietly turning sunlight, which is free, which falls on that dirt whether you're there or not, into money. You built the machine once. Now it just sits there for 25 years, printing checks while you sleep. No employees to manage. No inventory. No customers to keep happy. Just the sun, the panels, and a utility company that's contractually obligated to buy every kilowatt you produce. That's the picture. That's what the brochure sells you. Passive income from the sky. Here's the problem. The sun is free, but almost nothing else about a solar farm is. Before that meter spins a single time, you are going to spend somewhere between $1 and $1.5 million for every megawatt you want to build. You are going to wait, on average, 5 years just to get permission to plug into the grid, and there's a very real chance you never get plugged in at all. You're going to discover that the electricity you produce is worth the most in the winter evenings, when your panels make nothing, and worth almost nothing in the summer afternoons, when they're flooding the grid alongside every other solar farm for 100 miles. You'll learn that your panels lose a little power every single year, guaranteed, in writing. And you'll learn that the biggest solar company the world had ever seen went from Wall Street darling to bankruptcy in about 9 months, not because the sun stopped shining, but because of the one thing nobody in the fantasy ever talks about. So let me reframe this for you right up front. A solar farm is not really an energy business. It is not really a technology business. It is a real estate and finance business that happens to have solar panels sitting on top of it. Read that again, because everything else in this video depends on it. The panels are almost the least interesting part. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly where the $1 million goes, why, how much power it makes, and how much money it makes are two completely different questions, the single counterintuitive mechanism that separates the people who get rich from the people who go broke, and why the smartest money in this entire industry isn't really chasing electricity at all. You'll understand it well enough that the next time someone tells you solar farms are passive income from the sky, you'll know exactly which question to ask them. Okay, so, before we talk about money, we need to talk about what a solar farm actually is. Because solar farm is one of those phrases that sounds like one thing and is secretly 3 or 4 completely different businesses wearing the same coat. Some solar farms are utility scale. These are the big ones, 50, 100, 500 megawatts, sprawling across thousands of acres, built by developers with hundreds of millions in financing, selling power in bulk directly to a utility or a giant corporation. Some are community solar, mid-sized projects, a couple of megawatts, where the electricity gets divided up among dozens or hundreds of local subscribers who each shave a bit off their power bill. And some are behind-the-meter commercial systems, panels on a warehouse roof or a corner of a factory's parking lot, built not to sell power to anyone, but to stop the owner from buying it. Those are not variations on a theme. They earn money in fundamentally different ways, they answer to different regulators, and they carry completely different risks. The warehouse system is basically an efficiency upgrade, it's a cost avoidance play. The utility-scale project is a merchant power plant with a Wall Street balance sheet. Confusing the two is how people lose money. For this video, we're going to focus on the one most people mean when they say, I want to own a solar farm, the standalone, ground-mounted farm that sells its electricity to the grid. Utility scale and community scale. The field and the fantasy. Because that's the version where the economics get genuinely strange and genuinely instructive. Let's start with the number that scares people off, and then let's talk about why it's the wrong number to be scared of. The upfront cost. The big one. According to Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, that's a U.S. Department of Energy research lab, and they publish the most trusted data set on this stuff every year. The average installed cost of a utility-scale solar project in the United States was about $1.08 per watt of direct current capacity in 2023. Now, per watt is the industry's unit, so let me translate. A 1 megawatt solar farm is 1 million watts. At roughly $1 a watt, that's about $1 million for 1 megawatt. Private developers and land brokers will quote you a range of somewhere between $890,000 and about $1.3 million per megawatt, all in, depending on where you build and what equipment you use. So a modest 5 megawatt community solar farm, small, by industry standards, is a $4 to $6 million project. A utility-scale 100 megawatt farm is a $100+ million project. That's the entry ticket. And here's the first lesson, the one that trips up nearly everyone. The price to build it and the profitability of running it are two completely different numbers. Two identical solar farms, same panels, same size, same cost to build, can have wildly different returns depending on one thing, where they sit and what they're allowed to plug into. The cheap land is cheap for a reason. We'll get to that. For now, just hold on to this. What you pay to build a solar farm tells you almost nothing about what it will earn. Now, here's where it gets expensive in ways nobody puts in the brochure. Because that dollar a watt figure is the panels, the racking, the inverters, the wiring, the stuff you can photograph. It is not the full cost of getting a solar farm to actually make money. Let me walk you through the costs nobody budgets for. First, the land. You either buy it or you lease it, and most developers lease. Solar needs a lot of space. According to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, a utility-scale farm takes somewhere between 5 and roughly 9 acres for every megawatt. So a 100 megawatt farm might tie up 6, 7, 800 acres. Landowners who lease their fields to solar developers can earn anywhere from a few $100s to well over $1,000 or even $2,000 per acre per year, far more than they'd make growing corn. Good for the farmer. But for you, the developer, that's a recurring cost that runs for the entire 25 to 30-year life of the project, before you've earned a dime. Second, and this is the big one, the silent killer, interconnection. This is the cost and the process of physically connecting your farm to the electrical grid. And I need you to slow down here, because this single item destroys more solar projects than bad weather ever will. When you want to plug a power plant into the grid, you can't just run a wire. You have to apply. You get in a queue. The grid operator studies whether the local wires can even handle your electricity, and if they can't, you pay to upgrade them. That can mean new transformers, new substations, miles of new high-voltage line. The bill for those upgrades can run from a few $100,000 into the tens of millions. And here's the cruel part. You often don't find out the number until you're already deep into the process. And the wait. According to Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories, queued-up report, the typical time from requesting a connection to actually switching on has stretched to about 5 years for recent projects, up from under 2 years back in 2008. As of the end of 2023, there were roughly 2,600 gigawatts of energy and storage projects sitting in these queues. That is nearly twice the total size of the entire existing U.S. power grid, most of it solar and batteries, all waiting in line. And of the projects that got in line between 2000 and 2018, only about 14% of the capacity was ever actually built. The rest gave up, got priced out on upgrade costs, or ran out of money waiting. Let that land for a moment. The most likely outcome for a solar project entering the grid queue is that it never gets built at all. Third, the soft costs. Permitting. Environmental studies. Zoning fights with the county. Legal fees for the power contract. Engineering. According to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, these soft costs, the paperwork, essentially, can eat up a meaningful chunk of the total budget, and for a big project the approval process alone routinely takes 3 to 5 years. You're paying lawyers and consultants that entire time before a single panel is bolted down. Fourth, the money itself. You're not paying cash for a $100 million farm. You're borrowing most of it, which means interest payments, and when interest rates rise, the math on a project that was penciled out at low rates can simply collapse. The cost of the money is a cost of the farm. So add it up. Before a single kilowatt flows, before a single check arrives, you've got land, interconnection, soft costs, and financing all bleeding cash for years. That's the iceberg under the $1-a-watt waterline. Now, here's the counterintuitive mechanism, the single idea that recontextualizes this entire business. And I want you to really sit with this one, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. A solar farm does not get paid for the electricity it makes. It gets paid for the electricity it makes at the moment the grid actually wants it. Those are not the same thing. In fact, they're almost opposites. Here's why. A solar farm produces the most power at exactly midday in the summer, when the sun is highest and hottest. The problem is, so does every other solar farm on the same grid. And when a flood of solar all hits at once, in the middle of the day, when demand is only moderate, the price of electricity in that moment doesn't just fall, it can crater to nothing, or even go negative, meaning producers briefly have to pay to offload power. Grid operators call the shape of this problem the duck curve, first named by California's grid operator, CAISO, a chart of daily demand that sags in the sunny middle of the day and then spikes hard in the early evening. And the evening spike, that peak when everyone gets home and turns on the AC and the oven and the lights, that happens right as the sun is going down and your panels are going dark. So here's the trap. Your farm gushes power exactly when power is cheapest, and goes quiet exactly when power is most valuable. You are, structurally, selling your product at the worst possible time of day. The sun is free, but it delivers on its own schedule, not the market's. And that mismatch, that timing problem, is the real business you're in. It is not a business about making energy. It is a business about the value of energy at a specific hour. That's why the smart operators are now bolting giant batteries onto their farms, not to make more power, but to move it, to store the worthless midday flood and sell it back during the valuable evening spike. The battery isn't an accessory. It's the thing that fixes the actual defect in the business. So how does the money actually come in? Let me break it into layers, because the utility pays me for power is only about half the story. The first layer is the electricity itself, and how you sell it decides almost everything. The gold standard is a power purchase agreement, a PPA, a long-term contract, often 15 or 20 years, where a utility or a big company agrees to buy all your power at a fixed price per unit. That fixed price is your bedrock. According to Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, recent long-term solar PPAs have averaged around $35 per megawatt-hour, though corporate buyers tracked by the marketplace Level 10 Energy have been paying more like $57, and the regional spread is enormous, as low as $20 to $30 in sunny, saturated California, and $65 to $85 in the Northeast. A signed PPA is what turns a solar farm from a gamble into something a bank will lend against. Without one, you're a merchant plant, selling into the open market at whatever the price happens to be that hour, which, as we just covered, is often close to nothing when you're producing most. The second layer is the credits and the certificates, the stuff that isn't electricity at all. Many states run programs that give you a tradable certificate, called a Renewable Energy Certificate or an SREC, for every unit of clean power you generate. Utilities that are legally required to hit clean energy targets have to buy those certificates from you. In a strong state market, that side income can rival the value of the electricity itself. You're selling the same megawatt-hour twice, once as power, once as proof it was clean. And the third layer, the one the sophisticated owners actually build the whole deal around, is the tax structure. But that one is so important it gets its own section. Hold that thought. Now let's talk about the bleed. The recurring costs, the ones that never stop for 25 years. The good news, genuinely, is that solar's operating costs are low compared to almost any other power plant, because there's no fuel to buy and nothing's on fire. But low is not zero, and here's where the daily reality lives. You've got operations and maintenance, cleaning panels, cutting the grass under and around them, fixing the wiring the rabbits chewed through, and monitoring the whole system remotely. Industry figures put ongoing operations and maintenance at very roughly $15 to $20 per kilowatt of capacity per year, which on a 5-megawatt farm is somewhere around $75,000 to $100,000 a year, every year. You've got the land lease payment, running the whole time. You've got property taxes and insurance, and insuring a field of glass in hail and tornado country is not cheap, and it's getting less cheap. And you've got the inverters. Now, here's a piece of jargon, and I'll define it the moment I say it. An inverter is the box that converts the direct current electricity your panels make into the alternating current the grid uses. It's the heart of the system. And unlike the panels, which have no moving parts and can last 30 years, the inverters wear out. Typically they need replacing somewhere around the 10 to 15-year mark. That's a major, predictable, 6 or 7 figure expense that lands right in the middle of your project's life. The people who forget to save for it get a very nasty surprise in year 12. And then there's the quiet erosion. Your panels degrade. According to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, solar panels lose about 0.5% of their output every single year. It's so reliable it's written into the manufacturer's warranty. It sounds tiny. 0.5%. But run it out. A 20-year-old panel produces only about 90% of what it did on day one, and it's still slowly falling. Your revenue machine gets a little weaker every year it operates, on a schedule you cannot stop. The sun shows up for free. The panels catching it do not stay new. So far, so good, sort of. Low fuel, but a steady, relentless bleed, plus a slow fade built into the physics. Now let's talk about the thing that can actually break the whole model. The core structural risk of a solar farm is not that the sun stops shining. It's price. Specifically, it's what happens when you don't have that fixed price PPA locked in, or when it expires. Remember the duck curve, the flood of solar crashing midday prices? Now imagine you're a merchant plant, exposed to those raw market prices, and imagine the region keeps building more and more solar around you. Every new farm makes the midday glut worse, which pushes the midday price your farm earns lower, which is a phenomenon economists actually have a name for, value deflation or cannibalization. Solar, at scale, eats its own lunch. The more of it there is on a grid, the less each new farm's power is worth at the exact hours it produces. So a farm that pencils out beautifully today, in a region planning to triple its solar, may be selling into a far weaker market a decade from now. The threat isn't cloudy weather. The threat is competition from the sun itself. Layer on top of that the interest rate risk we talked about, the policy risk. Tax credits get extended, then curtailed, then rewritten, and each rewrite reshuffles which projects make money, and you have a business whose biggest dangers are almost entirely financial and political, not technical. The panels work fine. It's the world around them that moves. Which brings us to the case study. Because everything I've just told you, the debt, the timing, the finance dressed as energy, it all played out, at enormous scale, in the story of a company called SunEdison. And this one is worth telling properly, from the top. For a while, SunEdison was the most exciting name in clean energy on the planet. By 2015, it had transformed itself from a quiet silicon materials company into the largest renewable energy developer in the world, building solar and wind projects across continents, buying up rivals, moving so fast that Wall Street could barely keep up. Its stock had rocketed. Its CEO, Ahmad Chatila, was celebrated as a visionary who was going to do to fossil fuels what the smartphone did to the landline. The company's strategy was built on a clever piece of financial engineering. It created what are called yieldcos, separate publicly traded companies, named Terraform Power and Terraform Global, whose job was to buy the finished solar and wind farms from the parent and pay out the steady electricity income to investors as dividends. SunEdison would build a project, sell it to its own yieldco, book the cash, and use that cash to go build, or buy, even more. As long as the stock stayed high and the money stayed cheap, the machine spun faster and faster. Here's where it gets interesting. That machine only worked in one direction. It depended entirely on being able to keep raising cheap money to fund the next acquisition. SunEdison had piled up more than $11 billion in debt fueling its shopping spree. And in 2015, it reached for one deal too many, an agreement to buy a residential rooftop solar company called Vivint Solar for around $2 billion, a deal that a lot of investors looked at and said, wait, why is a giant power plant developer paying that much to get into the door-to-door rooftop business? Confidence cracked. The stock started to fall. And the moment the stock fell, the whole model, buy with borrowed money, justify the borrowing with a high stock price, began to run in reverse. Falling stock meant it couldn't raise cheap money. No cheap money meant it couldn't service the debt. The Vivint deal collapsed. Lenders panicked. And the fall was breathtakingly fast. On April 21, 2016, SunEdison filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Its filing showed liabilities of about $16 billion. It was the largest bankruptcy in the history of the renewable energy industry, and by some accounts the whole collapse, from Wall Street high flyer to bankrupt, took about 9 months. 9 months. And here's the lesson, the one that ties this entire video together. SunEdison did not fail because solar didn't work. The panels it installed are still out there right now, quietly making power. The sun kept shining the entire time. It failed because it was, underneath the solar panels, a highly leveraged finance company, and it managed the finance badly. It borrowed short and bet long. It confused building an empire with running a business. The energy was never the problem. The balance sheet was. Which is exactly what I told you at the very start. A solar farm is not really an energy business. SunEdison is what happens when you forget that at a scale of $16 billion. So who actually wins at this? Because people clearly do. And here's the deeper game, the part that separates the fantasy version of solar ownership from the way the sophisticated money really plays it. The savvy owners are not primarily buying an electricity stream. They're buying a stack of financial advantages that happen to sit on top of an electricity stream. Layer 1 is the tax credit. Under the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, a solar project can qualify for an investment tax credit worth 30% of its cost, a dollar-for-dollar reduction in federal taxes owed. On a $10 million project, that's $3 million, straight off a tax bill, and under current law those credits can even be sold to other companies that need them. Layer 2 is depreciation, and this is the part that quietly makes the whole thing work. According to the Solar Energy Industries Association and Department of Energy guidance, solar equipment can be depreciated on an accelerated 5-year schedule, called MACRS, which lets the owner write off the bulk of the project's value against their taxable income in just the first few years. Combine the 30% credit with accelerated depreciation, and a wealthy owner or a corporation with a big tax bill can recover an enormous share of their investment through the tax code alone, before the electricity revenue even really matters. That's not a small thing. That's the thing. For the sophisticated investor, the electricity is almost the byproduct. The real product is a predictable, government-backed bundle of tax benefits, long-term inflation-linked income from a 20-year contract, and a hard, physical asset sitting on a piece of appreciating land. It's the same reason the wealthy love real estate: steady income, tax shelter, and an asset that holds value, except the tenant is the sun, and the rent is guaranteed by contract. That's not an energy play. That's a wealth preservation play wearing an energy costume. So let me put the whole thing together the way it actually feels to own one. Let me give you 2 realistic scenarios. Not made-up stories, just the honest arithmetic, playing out 2 ways. The good year. You built a well-sited farm in a strong market. You locked in a 20-year PPA before you broke ground, so your price per unit is fixed and you don't care what the daily market does. The sun cooperates. Your panels run near their expected capacity factor, which, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, averages around a quarter of nameplate for U.S. solar, meaning a 1-megawatt farm realistically produces about a quarter of what it theoretically could if the sun never set. Your inverters behave. Your tax credit came through at 30%, your depreciation sheltered a mountain of income in the early years, and your operating costs stayed right around forecast. In the good year, this thing is beautiful. It is a bond that you can see from a satellite. Money comes in on a schedule, the loan gets paid down, and the asset just sits there, humming, converting free sunlight into contractually guaranteed cash. This is the year that makes the fantasy true. The bad year. You built as a merchant plant, no PPA, betting you'd sell into the market. But your whole region kept building solar, the midday prices cannibalized down toward nothing, and your power is worth the least at the exact hours you make the most of it. Interest rates rose after you borrowed, so your debt payments climbed while your revenue sagged. A hailstorm cracked a few hundred panels, and you discovered what solar insurance costs after a claim. It's year 12, so the inverters all need replacing at once. A 6-figure hit you half forgot was coming. And a policy change reshuffled the credit market you were counting on. Nothing caught fire. The sun came up every single day. And you still lost money, because the business was never really about the sun. In the bad year, you find out, the way SunEdison found out, that a solar farm is a leveraged financial asset, and leverage cuts both ways. Same panels. Same sunlight. Same field in the fantasy. 2 completely different businesses, decided almost entirely by things that have nothing to do with the weather, the contract, the debt, the location, the timing, the tax structure. So go back to that opening image. The clear morning, the blue panels tracking the sun, the meter spinning quietly at the edge of the field. It's a real picture. That part isn't a lie. But now you know what's actually underneath it. Underneath the glass is a grid queue you might wait 5 years to clear and might never clear at all. Underneath the hum is a contract that decides whether your power is worth $80 or 8. Underneath the whole calm, silent, effortless machine is a balance sheet, a tax return, and a piece of land, and those are the parts that decide whether you get rich or get wiped out. The sunlight was never the business. The sunlight is free, and free things don't make anyone wealthy. The panels aren't really the business either. The panels are just the part you can see. The finance is the business. The land is the business. The timing is the business. The sun isn't really the asset. The machine you build to sell it, at exactly the right moment, on exactly the right terms, that's the asset.